Welcome to Fitter Every Day. I'm Jeff Woody, and we are going to be joined today by Shawn Nuetzman, who is the co-owner of Goldfinch Athletics. Now, one of the things that we're going to be talking today, well, the main thing we're going to be talking about today is programming. Now, programming, quick definition of what that is for those that are unfamiliar, it's what are the activities that you are doing today, but not just today. What are you doing tomorrow? What are you doing next week? And what do these things that you're doing have to do with each other? Because good programming builds towards something. It gives you an outcome. Bad programming, you just kind of do stuff. So we talk a lot about the process that we go through when we do program at any of our locations, but also kind of individually our process on getting that done. So if you're enjoying these episodes, please like and subscribe to whatever podcast or video service that you are watching or listening to these on, and enjoy this episode of Fitter Every Day where Shawn and I talk about programming. The first place that we really need to start with programming is the point at all. Like, you can't shoot an arrow to nothing. I mean, you could, it just doesn't make any sense.
Gotta have a target. Yeah.
All the episode or all the effort of trying to do that just doesn't make any sense unless you're actually shooting towards something. So the first thing when we talk about programming is what you're shooting for. And in this episode, we're going to talk about programming for CrossFit. We're going to get Tucker on at a later date to talk about when you're programming for sports performance, because it's very different, and mainly the difference is in what you're shooting for. So talking about the CrossFit part, explain in 2 minutes or less, as best you can, what's the point of programming for CrossFit? What are you targeting when you are doing CrossFit programming?
The main goal of CrossFit is we're programming towards general physical preparedness. And
otherwise known as GPP.
GPP, yes. And our unique situation we have, so myself, Jeff, Amy, we all have a lot of experience programming CrossFit, which helps. So we cycle through, we each do 6-week cycles. And it works because we all have a different method, but the end goal is always the same. All right. There's many different paths to get there. And that's true for, other gyms too. They have the same goal and they're going to program different ways. But I like our system because between the three of us, it's kind of like, one is kind of like checks and balances where we can, I'll program a cycle and then give you my notes, and then you guys can give me feedback on what's good and what's not. But we all have our own biases, even though we're not, always knowledgeable of that. And for me, myself, I can do certain movements all day. You can do different movements. You could probably squat every day and you'd be fine. Mm-hmm. I squat once a week and I'm sore. Chicken legs. That's the way it is. I bench press every day, and I could do double unders every day, and I've never have an issue with that.
Yeah, my shoulders would fall off if I bench
Exactly. So we all have those biases. So there's sometimes where I'll get a little heavy on the shoulders of the body weight stuff or running or stuff that really doesn't affect me as much. And you and Amy can step in and be like, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah. And we have, when we're programming for CrossFit, the first episode of this podcast, which we don't have, if you're watching on YouTube right now, hi, welcome, thanks. But if you're listening audio, the first episode of Fitter Every Day is about what the point of fitness is. So if you're really interested in what is the actual target that we're shooting for, the general physical preparedness, that's what it is you can go back, I think it's 35 minutes worth. It's really entertaining. It's really good because Amy's really knowledgeable. Side note, Amy was supposed to be here today, but she's sick at this point, so we have to, Shawn and I do it. So at a later date, we'll get Amy's input on programming because she is a huge part of actually getting everything together. But you were mentioning that we do 6 weeks, I do 6 weeks, you do 6 weeks, and Amy does 6 weeks. We elected to do that because we used to do it where, way back in the day prior to Amy, it was you program 2 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
Maybe. You're programming a week in advance.
And actually, that's really stressful to do. And it seems cluttered at times. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just way easier. You block it out in 6 weeks. You have specific goals in those 6 weeks. Because CrossFit's so broad. If you just say program 6 weeks, you can literally go, or 2 weeks, you can just go anywhere.
Yeah, you can do anything you want.
If you have set guidelines, you have 6 weeks, and you have movements that you're going to focus on. So we usually have 1 or 2 strength movements. So it's kind of like bumpers where it's all right, we're going to guide you here. And then we have specific goals that are skills that we're going to work towards. And then maybe we have a specific Metcon that we're going to work towards. Maybe we're working towards Murph. So the more guidelines you have, it's not as broad, and it's easier, just puts those bumpers in. So it's easier to actually program.
Yeah, there is, I forget the name. It's Adrian Bosman and guy who runs Linchpin. Complete brain fart. He's a CrossFit guy. They have a podcast called Very Not Random, and they were talking about their programming method. And one of the things that was similar with the way they do it and the way we do it is they do it in 4-week blocks. We do ours in 6-week blocks. And I think the 6 weeks comes from when you're doing more conventional strength and conditioning stuff, the world of the 5 sets of 12 into 4 sets of 10 into that. So usually those come in 6 weeks blocks, but that part has been pretty heavily researched, as in that is usually about the amount of time where if you are having some, whether it's a bias or a specific thing that you're trying to look for, 6 weeks is about the minimum amount of time that you could have to work towards that. Translation, let's say we want to make your back squat higher. We want to make you squat more. If we only did it for 2 weeks and focused on that for 2 weeks, you're not going to see a noticeable change over the course of 2 weeks because there's not enough time for adaptation to occur. So 6 weeks is usually when we do have a focus, it's enough to move the needle, even if it's only 5%, 2% in one direction, that because we do everything all the time, not literally every movement, but pretty much like anything a body can do, we kind of try and do it. And so because you're not going to not squat, but if we're going to try and work on your back squat, we're going to do 6 weeks of working on a back squat. You're still going to back squat in the other times. It just might not be a focus, but in the time, those 6 weeks that we're programming, that gives your body and neurological system enough time to program the way to do it better. Because a lot of programming and development of strength and skill isn't necessarily like my muscles are getting better, my muscles are getting bigger. Like, to dork out on muscles a little bit is when you are, in order to fire a muscle, in order for a muscle to work, you have to tell it to work. And if you told every muscle every time to work, then it wouldn't, you'd never be able to get anything done. Like, imagine trying to write a sentence if every muscle in your arm had to be flexed. Like, if you're trying to, show off for the mirror or whatever, and biceps, triceps just tense the entire time. Imagine trying to execute that all the time. So over the course of learning how to write or learning how to throw or learning how whatever, you learn what muscles to turn off and learn what muscles to turn on. And your brain then has that pathway set up of saying, oh, when you want to throw, I need to make sure that my left shoulder opens up, my right shoulder comes through, my right elbow. And you get this pattern coming on. And that's the broad concept for that is called motor control. It's just how you move your body and stuff. And what is easy is if I've got 100 muscles at my disposal, I might only need 30 of them to actually make the thing happen. But practice makes it so I know which 30 and in what order they need to go. So if I'm trying to squat, I'm not necessarily making my muscles bigger. It's just I'm making my nervous system figure out how to do it better because we do it enough that you're practicing it enough to make it work.
Yep, just the most efficient way to get it done.
So those 6 weeks, when we do block off 6 weeks, it's not random that we picked 6 weeks. It's just that's layering in a conventional strength and conditioning background into a CrossFit space where you do have enough time to make something happen. So that being said, you mentioned there's like bumper lanes. The way we do 6 weeks is, and I think you touched on it earlier, was I will take 6 weeks, you'll take 6 weeks, then Amy takes 6 weeks, then I'll pick back up and I'll do 6 weeks and you'll do whatever. But it's not like I get to choose whatever I want, is we will get together and say, all right, what do we want Shawn's programming to be based upon? And then from there we go.
Yep.
Even in that, whether it's mine or Amy's or yours, you're normally the person who comes up with the strength progressions throughout those 6 weeks. It's usually you, and then Amy and I will layer that in. So the first step when we do 6 weeks is you layer that focus point in. If that focus point is a strength one, how do you come up with the strength progression? So let's use a deadlift cycle as an example. We're trying to focus on a deadlift, which we don't have that for, I think, until
actually
at least after
I'm
the
working
open.
On, that's my cycle. So it's like
After the open.
Yep. So when this cycle, one more, and then mine.
And end of March is when we'd be. So right now we're recording this in January. It'd be the end of March when you're working on yours. So that's how far ahead we try and stay. So let's say we're working on a deadlift cycle. How do you come up with deadlift 1.1, deadlift 1.2, 2.1, 2.2? How does that work? And what are the considerations that go into that?
Yeah. So this will work perfectly because I was just, the cycle that I'm programming has deadlifts as one of our strengths. And then we do some shouldered overhead work. So the first thing I map out is just like, I have to do everything on paper. I don't like to do anything on a computer. So I'm old school. So I'm literally going to have a sheet of paper with my progressions for strength. And then I'm going to have one sheet of paper for each week. And then I'm going to plug it in. So I always do strength first. And we'll usually start with some volume-based work.
Okay. Define that.
So basically, kind of like what you said, we want to get some reps in at a manageable weight just to kind of groove that movement pattern. So it's not going to be a thing that's extremely stressful on the body since we probably haven't deadlifted for a while. So we're talking like 5 or 6 sets of 8 to 10 reps, not real heavy, like 60%. So it's not going to be real taxing on the body. So we start with that. And I don't like to do too many volume-based days just because just in the day-and-day CrossFit, like you're going to get deadlift, you're going to get hinging in some capacity.
Yeah,
so it's not like
bending at the waist.
it's not like
that
you,
movement's called hinging.
yeah. So even if we haven't done like a lot of heavy deadlifts, you've still been hinging. So it's not like going to be foreign to you. You get a pretty good idea of what you're doing. So we'll start with some volume-based work. And then I like to have my max strength days, which can be, build to a heavy triple, build to a heavy 5 rep, something like that. I like to have my speed days where we're moving fast. And maybe that means in hinging, maybe that's just power planes from the floor. I mean, it's a very similar movement. We can do the same thing. And then kind of thinking outside of the box, we'll do some like accommodating resistance where we'll do some banded deadlifts or something like that. But more than anything, I think the reason behind this, like as we go from volume to strength to speed, that's kind of like the traditional like strength and conditioning approach. Like if you blocked off different goals throughout the cycle. So that's kind of the background of it. But more than anything, it's something different. So we're not doing the same thing constantly. Like if you've been doing CrossFit for 10 years and you've been doing, 5-3-1 or 6 sets of 4 at 80% and then 8 sets of 3 at 85%, at a certain point, you can do that so much where you're not going to adapt to it because you just, you've done it too much. So from a specific, like just from a boredom standpoint, it's like, we're going to mix this up.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And I think another thing about that is when we're programming, a lot of times when those days come in, you have a high volume day or a high strength day. We've tried in the past, and every once in a while we'll put these in, is just a strength only day where let's say it's in the deadlift cycle and you're working towards, we're going to do a 1 rep max or like a heavy 2 deadlift or something like that. There might be days where when we put an optional Metcon in there, the problem that we have when we do an only strength day is there are some people in whatever movement it is that either can't or have absolutely zero desire to lift heavy. And deadlift's a very understandable one. Like if you've had back problems in the past, I don't want to lift super heavy on a deadlift. That is the technical capacity that I have to do it and the potential risk for injury don't really match. Like I don't want to do this at all. But there are other people where you think of your heavy power lifters or your people, even just that are developing strength, they want to do that. Ideally, if we had a magic wand and everybody always wanted to do everything that we programmed, which has never happened in the history of programming, is that everybody wants to do it. If you had a magic wand and everybody wants to do the thing that you're programming, we would program strength only days. But the problem is again, that doesn't serve most of the population. So we'll put in an ancillary Metcon to that. But because of when you get to those really heavy strength days, talking about the neurological system, neurons don't just fire. Like it doesn't just happen. Like there's energy that goes into producing that much force. Like your neurons actually telling your muscles to fire takes a ton of just physical body energy. And that's why when you do those really heavy days, we put in a pretty good amount of rest in there. Like a heavy deadlift day, technically speaking, like, yeah, it's 1 rep doesn't take that long, but you're going to have 3.5 minutes between there because it's sort of like somebody going to shock someone with a defibrillator. It goes like that sound and that feeling. It's because it has to charge up. Like it has to load back in the energy to produce that much force. The same thing happens when you're deadlifts. You have to load back in that energy. So when we're programming, we start with the strength stuff because it requires so much time. And then from there, we start to hang everything else off of it. So that's usually the bumper lanes that you were mentioning before. That's usually the bumper lanes that we start
the
with.
first ones. And if you can add more, that's great. And just to kind of talk about that point too, like we've done just strength days in the past. But I mean, it's a problem if, say, we do that like on like a Wednesday and for some reason someone can't come Tuesday and Thursday. It's like that's 3 days and they've done deadlifts and that's it. So that's another reason why I don't like to just do strength days. And some, like you said, some people get amped up and like that's the reason they're there. They want to lift heavy weights. Some people, it's just like, all right, I'll get a little bit of strength work in, but I want to do a Metcon too.
Yeah.
So to leave them that option is always nice because we have had just strength days in the past and it hasn't always worked out very well.
Yeah. I think one interesting conversational point too is how do we choose what that focus is? So like organizing this for someone who's not as mentally disjointed as I am is the point of programming is to general physical preparedness. So your body can do whatever it wants to do as well as it can do for as long as it can do it. So that's the point. And then the way that we structure that is we come up with one main focus, whether it's a strength or a skill or something like that, to provide ourselves bumper lanes. You do 6 weeks, I do 6 weeks, someone else does 6 weeks, or Amy does 6 weeks. But there is a natural question of how do you come up with that focus? Where does that come from? And it's not necessarily exclusively science-based, where like we have, every X number of months we have to do this, every whatever. It's in observations, because all of us coach and we interact really regularly with our coaches, that we say, you know what, we haven't done this in a while in our emphasis. And also we seem to be lacking at this skill in a way generally that we wish we were a little better. So things like our squats or our deadlift, it feels like that's a movement that we need to either practice more or get a little bit stronger on. So even though we might not have done, let's say we haven't done a handstand push-up cycle in a long time, which I think we had 3 cycles ago, we were working on handstand push-ups. But let's say we were doing a handstand push-up cycle, we haven't done in a while, but everybody's pretty proficient at it, then we don't necessarily need to spend the time to do that. But let's say we did a squat cycle 3 times ago, but we also could still improve on squats. We might redo squats more frequently than we have redone handstand push-ups, because as a group, as a population, we tend to be better at one thing than the other, or we value one a little bit higher based on who's actually there in that. So that's how, at least my perception of how we come up with that initial thing. But it's not exactly scientific where the focus is. It's just, we haven't done this in X number of months and we're bad at it, or we'd like to improve upon it.
Yeah, I think that helps that all 3 of us that program are, very active coaching our classes.
And in the class.
Yeah. And we talk about, like we said, like we discuss what we need to work on for each cycle. Like we're going to be working on, or this cycle we're working on stuff to prepare for the open. Like there's specific stuff that I know Amy mentioned she wanted to work on before the open that we needed help with. I know burpee standards are going to be something new that we work on next cycle after watching last week's workout. So yeah, we always talk about stuff that we can work on, but we lay the bumpers with our strength work. And then after that, if there's specific metcons, like we're going to be, preparing for Murph. So that's something that we will program towards. So maybe towards the end of the cycle is going to be Murph. We start to accumulate more and more volume throughout the cycle to get ready for 100 pull-ups and 200 push-ups and 300 air squats. So when you have metcons
and 2 miles of running,
like I said, I don't have to think about 2 miles of running. There's also 2 miles of running in there. Yeah, we'll prepare for that. I like to also, like if I can go into a cycle with maybe 1 or 2 metcons that I know everybody likes, and I can plug those in somewhere, like that also helps. Like everybody loves Holly Man. Like you can't program Holly Man, and so like everybody always just seems to love that workout. So it helps to have workouts like that where I can plug this in somewhere, or we can kind of work towards this so we're ready to go. That also helps. I know there was a couple cycles ago where I programmed an interval every Monday, and it wasn't because it was some magic scientific thing. Like intervals are great, but just like, all right, if I know I'm doing an interval every Monday, like that's just less I have to think about. Like we're going to do a rowing interval, we're going to do a bike interval, we're going to do a running interval. And then we're also going to do some mashups. So that also makes programming a little bit easier, just adding more bumpers like that.
Yeah, and I think so the step for me so this is where it sort of starts to deviate, where we're all shooting for the same target. And like the way we specifically do it is I'm going to come up with my 6 weeks and lay out as many as I can. And I like to have 6 all the way done. I think Amy likes to have the lattice pretty much laid, where she wants to get these things done and then fill in the color for the first 2 weeks at a time, send that off. The next few weeks, send that off. The next few weeks.
Do you go day by day when you do it, or how do you do it?
No, so that's actually, So the first step is laying the bumper lanes. And the second way, the way that I like to go about doing it is, dork here, is, so there's 3 different energy systems that your body can generally work with. So there's oxidative, there's glycolytic, and there's oxidative glycolytic. Now what that means is fast twitch, slow twitch, and an intermediate twitch. So fast twitch muscle is power lifters, football players, high jumpers. Like you are trying to produce as much power as you possibly can for a very short time. And like when I mentioned soreness, I think it was last episode, where soreness is not lactic acid. What lactic acid has to do with is where that short-term fast twitch muscle fiber, where that runs out of juice, is because lactic acid's a process, is a step in that process. And that's the bottleneck step where your body can't convert that into something else. And so at the point where your body can't turn lactic acid, that's what's called the wall. So if you ever watch a track and field event, it's easiest to see it where runner is on a 400 meter dash. Runner is on the first turn, they're great. The backstretch, they're great. On the second turn, they get to start a second turn, and all of a sudden their running gait starts to shorten, and they start to slow down, and like the pain on their face starts to show up. In the first half of that, their body was turning lactic acid into energy, and it needs it, and it's a lot of energy. It's expensive to do that. But then once you get to that end point, you have taxed that system, and you are just trying to find any energy in your body that you possibly can. That wall, that's lactic acid. It's not soreness. If you hit that lactic acid threshold, you're going to be sore because you're finding energy from other places. But that's short-term energy, like fast twitch energy systems. Long twitch or slow twitch or long-term is marathon runner. It's very low power. Like you can, if you go for a walk with your mom or your grandma or whatever, and you're just going walking for like 5-6 miles over the course of 3 hours, you have energy to do that. You're not like, it's tiring, but you're not super dead because it's a different way of processing energy. Then there's the stuff in the middle, which is soccer games, basketball games, where you have to go from fast to slow. You're never at 100% speed, or very rarely at like 100% speed, but you're hanging out at like 80% as fast as you can go for a while. And
never fully recovering.
Never fully recovering, but you're never fully sprinting. It's somewhere in between there. And so those 3 energy systems, they have like different time domains. So the maximum that, if you think of the fastest twitch person, or a 400 meter, Michael Johnson, when he's back setting Olympic records in the 80s and 90s, Carl Lewis, those people, they can go a minute of fast twitch because they're trained in how to do that. But that's like as a minute, 2 minutes, that's about the maximum that we can have for that short-term fast twitch fibers. The slow twitch stuff, there isn't really a limit. You just got to get more in shape for it. Like people theoretically could run for 2 days. People do ultra marathons, run for 100 miles. You can do that because it's a slow simmer for a long time. And the middle state, kind of like 12 to 15 minutes, is where you start to tap out or start to really access a difficulty in that intermediate, that kind of in-between muscle fiber stage. So when I'm programming, I'm trying to hit all 3 of those systems with a different focus across the week.
Yep.
So when we program that fast twitch muscle fiber stuff, that is a heavy lift because it is a lot of power in a very short amount of time. Also, that's Fran, where it's not very heavy.
Fran for you, like Fran's a little longer for me.
But Fran being 21-15-9 thrusters and pull-ups, when you get to a certain point, that's like 2 minutes is like world class. So let's call it on the really fast end, 2.5 to like 5-7 minutes on the what should be slow. And if it's slower than that, it's depending on the goals that you might be, whatever. We can talk about that at a different time. But like it's called 3 to 5 minutes. Like that's still, you're gonna hit a wall in Fran. The same thing as the runner on that second turn where you're good. Uh-oh, I'm not good. And so we want to find that. So I'm going to have usually 1, maybe 2 of those in a week. Because if you do more than 2 of those in a week, where you're getting smacked at the end of that energy threshold, you're done.
And so do you typically put a workout like that on your strength day? Thinking about like, because you have an hour of class, and so is that typically going to be when you're doing something else beforehand?
Somewhat. And at the same time, you can also layer a heavy strength day with a slow twitch simmer day, where let's say we're going to work to a heavy 1 deadlift or heavy 5 deadlift or something like that. And we're going to have 15 minutes to get to a heavy 5 deadlift. It gives me 15 minutes of prep time, 5 minutes of whiteboard, which means I have 25 minutes of class left. We could do 800 meter run, 35 push-ups, 20 air squats or something like that. I could do that as a 17-minute AMRAP, and that's a slow simmer the entire time. I still have that time to work with. I conventionally will probably put that sprint day at the same time as the heavy day because it's easier to prepare both of them, but it's not necessarily exclusive.
Yeah.
So I would say to answer the question you asked like 13 minutes ago is, do I do them a week at a time? As I usually try and lay out the priorities that I have within those energy systems, and I'll just make a note of myself because I actually do it by hand too. I was giving you crap before, but like I still do it by hand because my brain works like a scatter plot.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like
it helps
linear.
To see everything like that.
So I'll have like, strength day 1 is Tuesday of week 1, and then strength day 2 is Friday of week 1, and then also in week 1 I'll just note to myself fast twitch day 1, and then I'll note on Thursday long simmer or something like that, where I'll give a note to where I want to hang the energy systems. That's my step 2, is I'll get the lattice work done, and then what energy system do I want to start pushing? And then that's when it gets really fun, is once you have the general, you have the skeleton and the outline of where everything's going to go, and then you can start being creative.
Put the polish on it. Yeah, and that's where it does get fun, where you can use your creative juices to kind of finalize everything. I'm similar, so like I said, I'll do my strength first, and then I like to do at least one heavy-ish lift in a Metcon, like with your heart rate up a little bit. So that's typically the second thing that I'll do after I program my main strength. Is I'll find, all right, what day should we do this? Like, and like we're deadlifting for our main strength, and this next cycle I'm doing. So like the heavy Metcon might be like a front squat or like a hang squat clean, where we're not pulling from the floor, but something like that, or a shouldered overhead, something like that. So that's typically what I'll do next. And I won't like plug in like a certain Metcon or like specific thing. Like you said, it's just like, today we're going to lift heavy here. And then while I'm mapping out the rest of the week, then we can kind of plug stuff in as we go.
Yeah. And there are some times when, because I like, one of my favorite things is dropping into other gyms, and my wife and I travel a good bit. So when we travel, I like to drop into gyms, and sometimes I'll just like flat out steal that programming because I like the workout.
There's a workout you like. Yeah.
Also, there's other times where I go, what they did, or when I watch the CrossFit Games, or I'll watch regionals, or I'll see some other thing, I'll say, I see what they were shooting for here. I would like to do this instead of that, but I'm going to see, how do I work this thing in, because that was really fun. And accessing, you're mentioning like sometimes you like to do a heavy thing inside of a Metcon. That sort of feels when you play with load, that's like load and time are the two things that are, like, to me, the biggest levers that you have when you're changing the workout. Like Fran is an easy example, 21-15-9. If I was to have someone do Fran, but change it to 185, 125, that's a completely different workout, because your energy system, you can't just hang on to 185 and just crank out 21 thrusters unless you're, Matt Frazier. And even Matt Frazier is probably gonna have to take a break after that, because there's a limit to what you can do.
Or even switching pull-ups to muscle-ups. Like
Right. It completely changes the workout. So it goes from this fast twitch, really quick workout to being something long. And so when you're mentioning about doing something heavy in a workout, it takes what normally would be a faster, quicker something, and it pushes it a little bit differently to where you're kind of testing a different thing. So that's kind of fun stuff, is the load and time are two things that you can change. And the time part, before I have a question, but the time part, there's a couple reasons why, let's say I have on Monday, I say that I want to do something fast, and it's the fast twitch day. We're doing something, we haven't done a strength, we're just doing something that I want people to go. If I say the workout has a time cap of 30 minutes, that time cap indicates it sort of hints at what the expectation is sometimes, where you say the time cap's 30 minutes. Someone who has been doing CrossFit for a little bit goes, oh, okay, that's what the time cap is. I'll just see if I can get in under 30 minutes. Let's say the workout is Karen or something like that, and then you have to do some other stuff. So 150 wall balls, and you have to do some other stuff. And I say the time cap's 30 minutes, people are going to break that up into sets of 15 or 20 and go whatever. If I say the time cap is 6 minutes for the same workout, boy, that changes things.
You got to work.
Or vice versa with an AMRAP, is I go, it's a 6-minute AMRAP of these things with a 2-minute break and then a 3-minute AMRAP. Or same movements, same exact structure. Let's say it's 20 wall balls, 5 lunges each leg, and then run a 400 meter. If I say the time cap or the AMRAP on that, 31 minutes, you're going to approach the time and tempo way differently.
Different. Yep.
So you can change the load and time a lot and make it do what you want it to do.
Yeah. And that's one more thing I guess I forgot to mention that I like about us three kind of collaborating together to program. Like, there's almost a general guideline about the amount of volume that most people can handle in a workout. Like, if we're doing a 4-task workout, like, typically we're not going to program more pull-ups than like what we would do in Fran for most people. And then you can have RX Plus versions where you're going to do a little bit more, or you can have 4 time where maybe you're working faster. If you have the capacity to work faster, you have the capacity to do more reps, then you're going to be okay with that volume. But for the most part, we can collaborate together and look at workouts and be like, this volume is too much, or this volume's not enough. And I like that. That's another benefit from us three all working together to do it.
And there's another thing too, where there's another concept in programming, because I think a peek behind the curtain sometimes is fun to say that, like, oh, we're doing this workout today that I hate. Well, there's a plan. There's a reason why this workout's there. It's part science, part magic, part actually having a plan for what's going on forward. But there's the concept where there's movements that are complementary and there are movements that are interfering. So And that goes in workout and across a week. So, or a cycle. It goes like acute and chronic in this sense. So where an interfering movement is, let's say I was to program a workout, and there's a hero workout, which is a lot of pushing, but let's say I was to program a workout, which is 5 squat cleans, 5 front squats, 5 thrusters. Like, that's really gross. And the reason why it's really gross, well, everyone hates those movements, but it's really gross because they're all pretty much the same movement. There's a lot of interference between squat cleans, front squats, and thrusters. You're doing the same thing. So those movements interfere with each other. So 5 thrusters in and of themselves will feel one way. When I interfere as much as I have prior to that point, that feels a completely different way. Versus a complementary movement is, Fran, because we use this example a bunch of different times, Fran is a very complementary movement where pull-ups and thrusters don't have a ton to do with each other. Like the musculature and motor patterns that you're using to do pull-ups and the musculature and motor patterns you're using to do thrusters are very different. And so one of the reasons why Fran is so gross when you do it is because the thing that gets taxed first is your energy system, your lungs, because it's not like your legs are tired from having done thrusters and front squats and squat cleans. It's you do thrusters and then you move on to something that doesn't involve your legs at all and you're using your arms. So now your energy system just has to keep up more. And so that also applies throughout the week. So let's say on Monday, we're doing heavy squat cleans. And on Tuesday, we're doing heavy thrusters. And on Wednesday, we're doing heavy back squats. Like, we're interfering with ourselves a lot. So one of the things that when you do a cycle and I do a cycle and Amy does a cycle and we send it to each other for feedback is we'll do sort of an interference check and see, like, did you mean to do this?
Yep.
Is there we did thrusters Tuesday, we're doing front squats Thursday, and we're doing, lunges Friday. Like, that's a lot of pressing. Did you mean to do that? And sometimes the answer is yes. Like, I want to push legs here because we are coming up on Murph or something like that. We got to do 300 air squats, and it's better to get kicked in the face now than it is to get kicked in the face there. So yes, I meant to do this. But other times you go, oh shoot, I didn't recognize that I had interfered with myself as much as I did in this week or in this cycle.
Yep. Yeah. So that's another great point, that how we collaborate together. So we got our strength in. You kind of mapped out your metcons, like you've a general guideline
of energy system.
Yeah. So then how do you start plugging stuff in to actually finalize your workouts? How does that work?
So I like, there are certain times where
and do you test your workouts out beforehand?
Almost always there is a test of a workout ahead of time. There are some times when I can just know, I know what it's going to feel like because it's either, it's a girl WOD where that's been around for forever, like Helen. Like, I know what Helen is. I know how long it takes. I know what people feel like. I know how to scale it, what to focus on. I don't need to test Helen. But there are other workouts where you have to see what it feels like when you do it, see how long it is. So I always test it. But the next step in the process that I usually have is I love odd object work. Absolutely love it.
I hate it.
And so odd object work means anything that is an abnormal shape. So like a barbell and a dumbbell, like dumbbells can sometimes be odd objects, but like a barbell and your body, like those are things that you carry around. A barbell is a very symmetrical object. It's everything centered. An odd object is like a kettlebell or a dumbbell sometimes, or a sandbag, or doing burpees over a high thing. It's doing odd stuff because I like how that kind of applies to life. Is I like learning, weird example, but like you hanging out with you got a friend's barbecue and they have a fence and they're like a chain link fence in their backyard. And all of a sudden you see that like a toddler, someone left the gate open on the front and the toddler walked around and they're about to fall into a pond and you got to jump the fence. Like, has my body done different weird stuff so that I can just do a new thing when life presents it to me without like having to practice it or be bad at it? So like, I love doing new, odd, weird stuff. So usually I want to, if there's a movement that either I've tried or I've seen or I've thought of, and I go, all right, like in this next one, we're doing it. One of the workouts in my cycle involves putting a box at 30 inches and stacking up 6 45-pound plates on top of it and a heavy kettlebell on top of that. Like, it's a high thing. I have to lift weird stuff put it up on top of the box. And also, stealing over from AI is doing tosses over a pull-up bar.
Those are hard.
Which are really hard. Yeah. And so it's really shoulder fatiguing. And those are two weird movements. So I know that I want to do that. And I know that we're doing this strength. And so what neurological function and muscular function do we have in these strengths? So where can I put this odd object? And then I'm going to put that odd movement or that odd thing. And then from there, I can start to program the more conventional, quote, CrossFit-y things. But I always start with the odd stuff because that's the stuff that I find the most fun to do.
It's fun to watch. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff that I'm like most CrossFitters, like for some reason CrossFitters, it's constantly varied, but you throw something at them like that they haven't done a million times. Like, this is terrible.
Like single unders.
Yes. Like single unders. Or so it was a few weeks ago on a Saturday, we did shuttle runs and you had to put your hands on the box and jump over the box as you went over. And like, I remember explaining it to the class and like, they're like looking around like, this is terrible. Like, this is dumb. Why are we doing this? And then to watch them, like the first couple rounds they did it, it's like they're feeling it out and they're not real smooth by the end of the workout. They're like a hurdler, like an Olympic, like they're just flying over the box. And then we had some people like, I think I'm gonna stick around, I'm gonna do this workout again because I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's fun.
And it's like,
it's different.
Yeah, like how you change from whiteboard to the end of the workout. It's like, all right, it's fun. Yeah. So to watch them adapt and new movements like that, even though most of the time they will complain about it, it's always.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to voice their opinion. Like, no.
Yeah. But so I like to hang the odd objects put them where I want them. So I have my energy systems laid out. I have our strengths laid out. I put my odd objects in where I want to go. And then I think, all right, and I think the next two categories, and I don't know where you put these, I know you use them, is where and how much are we squatting and where and how much rig work do we have? So we, talk about interference and just generally, like if your hands tear, you're not going to come to the gym the next day, or you're going to have to scale out of it. So if we have pull-ups on Monday and chest to bars on Tuesday and muscle ups on Wednesday and ring muscle ups on Thursday, toes to bar on Friday, like your hands are going to be smoked or you're just going to you're going to start wrecking biceps and lats and it's just not safe.
Yep, I'm the same way. Like,
so I always
try to space those days.
Yeah. Where are we squatting and where are we pulling? Like that's the next thing. So it's odd object first. Where are we squatting? I know that I want to squat here. I want to pull here. And then it feels like at this point, we'd have our 6 weeks laid out. We'd have our strengths laid on. We have where the energy systems need to have happen. We know where odd objects are going to be, at least for me, where odd objects are going to get placed, where and how much we're squatting. So like I'll make a note, on some random Tuesday, I'll be like, hey, we can do lightweight, high volume squatting here. Like Karen, for example, for 150 wall balls. It's a lot. It's not a lot of weight. It's just a lot of reps. And then we're going to do a lot of pulling from the rig here or whatever. And then from there, go to town.
That's very similar to me. Do my strength, do my heavy metcons, and then rig work. I never like to do like anything back to back like that. And then from there, kind of plug like the more, it's almost like the more you plug in, the narrower everything gets, where you don't have as many options, and then you can kind of see what movements do I still need. How long does this metcon need to be, stuff like that, and then you just plug stuff in from there. So that's very similar to what I do when I program.
Yeah, and that's when it starts to get. I think that's the funnest part of the whole thing is once you have that structure laid down, then you can say, all right, I need a 12 to 15 minute workout, which is a reasonably high volume of squats, and our odd object is the next day, so probably shouldn't hinge too much because we're picking up sandbags the next day. So let's stay off of the hinging. I know we're squatting a decent amount. It's 12 to 15 minutes. And I like for my programming cycle, it's where winter turns to spring. So like I can't probably program running in the first part of the cycle, but I can probably program it in towards the end of the cycle because the odds of it being nice enough to run. Okay, so let's think running and squatting. And I know we're not pulling today. We're going to pull on Thursday. So we can upper body push here. So let's go a barbell push, some type of squat and running. That's what we're going to, what do I want to do with that combination of things? And there is
in the allotted time.
Yep. But even within that, there is a billion different ways that you can set.
I was thinking about that. Like if we gave you, me, and Amy like guidelines, like this is our strength, this is our goals for each day for 6 weeks. Like even with those bumpers, like we would all program completely different. And that's what's fun, the creativity. So you've mapped everything out. How long does it take for you from first starting a cycle to done with a cycle?
Usually about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks. And that's not, and I'm still testing for a few tiny tweaks after that 2 weeks. So it usually takes me about 2 weeks to get 6 weeks done.
Yeah. And so I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's like, we don't just like sit down and be like, I need to program 6 weeks. So I'm going to take 4 hours and I'm going to plug away. It's like, it doesn't work. Like I'll work for a couple hours and just be like, I'm not making any progress. So I'll take a break and come back the next day and pick up. And it's like, all right, why didn't I see this yesterday or something like that? So yeah, I'm the same way. It takes me at least 2 or 3 weeks to actually finalize everything and think about everything.
Yeah. And so we mentioned, so let's say at this point, we've got our ideas of what we want to have happen. We have something in for every day. We've checked our boxes. Now, another thing that I'm backtrack a little bit is there are sometimes when you might have an idea that you really like of how, Monday we're doing X and Tuesday we're doing Y, but it doesn't make sense. Those two interfere with each other, or those two, they don't necessarily it's too similar to itself, not necessarily interference, but it's not testing a different mechanism that you want to get.
Yeah.
And this really cool thing that you wanted to do, you just can't do it because it doesn't fit. There also are times when you go, well, Monday's workout actually would work better on Friday. But if I move Friday to Tuesday, then that means we're pulling 2 days in a row because it was supposed to be Tuesday, Friday, but now we have to go, okay, so if it's Monday and Friday, and now we have to move this strength thing over here. So it's very loosely laid until you kind of get the pieces, until the puzzle pieces are sort of set down. And then you can go, okay, so now I've moved. Initially, strength 1 was supposed to be Monday and strength 2 was supposed to be Friday. But now because I had to move stuff, strength 1 is Tuesday and strength 2 is still Friday, but the Metcon that was Wednesday is now Monday. And so you end up with eventually a lattice that comes down in the right spot.
Yeah. And that also, just listening to you talk like that, it's so easy to overthink everything when you program because, there's so many different options. And I think that's a lot of times why I'll take a break. Why I can't do everything at once is it's my mind starts to go every which direction, where it's just all right, I need to stop and then just take a break.
Yeah. And so now we have our lattice down. We have our 6 weeks that we think we're going to have. What are our time caps? Is this too much weight? Is this not enough weight? I know that I want to elicit this response. Is this eliciting the response that I want?
And Amy, I think, does a really good job because she does all of our class plans, and then she will write the stimulus for the day into our Explorer. So our members actually know what the goal is for the day. So I think that helps a lot too.
Yeah. But how she finds out what that is and that what we're trying to do is we have to test it.
Yeah.
And most of the time, if I'm working out in a day, I want to make that workout in a class because I still think, never trust a skinny chef, is I want to be in a class because it's the best damn fitness that you can get. And I still want to do that. But there are also times when I go, when I'm programming, there are times when I just have to, if I'm coaching an afternoon session or a morning session, then I'll have to go in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because I got to test this thing. And so when you're testing things, what are you looking for? Because it feels to me there's 2 phases of testing. When you're first testing stuff, when just kicking the tires, does this work?
Yep.
What are you looking for in the very first testing phase?
So it's actually, there's a few things. And one thing that I struggle with, I'll test a workout maybe that I'm going to do 1 week. And then the next day I'll test a workout that I'm going to do for another week. And so when I do stuff like that, I don't feel how it's layered throughout the week. Maybe we did lunges in this workout on Tuesday, and the day before I did a rest day, but the day before the class is doing heavy squats. And it's I don't take that into account. So that's one thing where it's very easy to overlook something like that. And I'm trying to get better at. The next thing I'll think about is just how it will flow in a class setting. All right. Are we doing rig work with 2 movements and there's going to be 20 people in class? How's that going to work?
And it's wall balls and toes to bar and sled pushes.
Is it a rowing couplet and we have 11 rowers and 25 people in class? So then you start to think about stuff like that. And that's just another challenge with programming at our gym, and kind of one of the things that we have to think about. Most of the time, if we are going to do a rowing workout or stuff on the rig, we're going to be in 2 groups. So one class is doing their strength or their skill work. The other half of the class is doing the Metcon. So that's something else that you'll think about after you have finalized or have a good idea of what you're going to do for that workout.
Yeah. And I think the things that I would test for right away, one is feasibility. How does the flow of this, you're talking about, how does the flow of this thing happen? I get off the rig. What do I do? Where do I go? Do I have to spend 5 minutes trying to figure out, am I going to the bike now? Do we all have to try and fight for 2 kettlebells? What are the things that we're going to do here? The other things that I'm testing for are there was a workout that I did, which was gnarly, and I was testing it, and it was, I did it at 135, and it was thrusters and shoulder overhead and stairs and running or something like that. Cause I tested at Huxley, which stairs convert to biking. So it's basically biking, rowing, thrusters, and shoulder overhead. And I did it at 135, and it was gross.
That sounds awful. I wouldn't even try it.
So when I was testing that one, I was okay, I know that the thing that I would say is my biggest wheelhouse in CrossFit is moderately heavy barbell cycling. I'm fairly good at that relative to other people. So I assume that I'm about anything that I'm going to be doing for the class, I do about 10 to 20% heavier, because that's what an average person who's been doing it for 6 months is going to walk in and feel. So if I'm doing it at 135, I'm testing it at 135 for 115 a lot of times just to see what that feels like for everybody else.
Yeah.
And then we'll make the RX plus what I was doing and just say that is what because it feels like for, Bob Jones, who's been doing it for 8 months, what it feels like for him, I want RX. But that same feeling I want to get for Bart and Maddie and the people that have been to regionals 5 times.
Yeah.
I want you to still feel the same thing. It's just going to be a different one. So when I'm testing the first thing for like load. What does it feel like for me? Like, is 12 chest to bars around? I want people to break once or twice maximum. If I do that with, these other 2 movements, did I have to break more than I wanted to? Okay, I need to move this load down. Or is this barbell too heavy? Is this wall ball enough? Or like, we're testing for reps and sort of feasibility to make sure that, all right, the barbell is going to be at 115, 85. It's going to be this amount ballpark of box jumps, and it's going to be this amount of running because I want each round to be about 3 minutes or something like that. And that's, okay, now that I know what that is, I can start, I can confirm that should exist in the way that I want it to on the calendar.
Yeah, and I bet, like, I test most of my workouts out, and I bet less than 50% of the time, the workout that I had going in is what's actually on paper at the end. Like, I'll feel it out and be like, yeah, this didn't work, or this would have been better. So that's why I love testing out the workouts ahead of time.
It's also nice to have Isaac around.
Yeah,
because Isaac's our guinea pig.
You just tell him to do something. He's like, yeah, I'll do that.
So it's like, we'll say, I want to see what this feels like, and here's what I'm trying to look for. If I can't test it, or if I've already tested it and I just want to get a second opinion on it, like, I feel bad for him because I'm programming for the pre-open and the open at this point.
Oh, that'll be tough.
And the pre-open, like I mentioned, like with Murph, we have to get people kicked in the face with a lot of pull-ups because otherwise it's dangerous to just do it one time. So we have to kind of get used to open-y style workouts. So when I'm testing now, once I've got everything on the map, I know that it's 115.75 or 115.85. This amount of box jumps, this amount of whatever. I know that these are all the movements that we're going for, and I've sort of got a flow figured out. Now I need to check: do I want a mercy time cap? Where is that mercy time cap at? Like, time cap's at 25 minutes, should be done in 15 minutes. If you're not done at 25 minutes, we're cutting you off anyway.
Your misery, yep.
But there's also, I call them the Dave Castro time caps, where it's like, it's time cap, 80% of people are going to be nowhere close to finishing it.
People.
And you might, but it also, that having that time cap, like I mentioned earlier, is like, if I set the time cap at 13 minutes, and it's going to take you 12 minutes and 54 seconds on a good day, then you're going to try and find that gear to get under the time cap.
Yep.
So once I get all the way done testing most of the things, then every once in a while I'll test another workout to say, where should this time cap be? Or do I need to knock this AMRAP down from 9 minutes to 7 minutes? Or do I need to are we doing this chipper? Should I remove some of the reps out of these few movements, whatever. And then at that point, once those are done, then we pretty much then I send them off to you and Amy to get checked for feasibility.
Yep.
And then kind of repeat the cycle as many times as necessary to get what's actually down on paper done.
That's very, very similar to what I do too. Should just start like sending Isaac random really hard workouts. It's like, Isaac, test this out. We're doing like 150 thrusters and 150 burpees.
We're thinking about doing double cal suit.
Test it out at 185 and let me know how long it takes.
It's
6
days later.
I'll fit it in between my snatch session and the other 4 Metcons I'm doing today.
All right. Yeah. I don't think that's a guy. We should kill him. Sorry, Isaac. We're not going to do that.
No, but that's very similar to actually how I attack my cycles and programming, which is, it's interesting. I think that's right now I've been programming for a while, and that's the most efficient way that I've been able to do it. So
yeah. And I'm sure, like I said, it'd be great to have Amy in this discussion, but like I said, she's sick. But once that's all done and we have our programs done, the next step, which is a thing that I don't know necessarily how she does it, but that's a whole nother episode, is once you get the programming that you have for the day, how do you get the lesson plan from that? And I think it's another conversation for another day.
Yep.
So that was, for those people that were not necessarily wondering how programming happens, but like there is an art to it to make sure that we are doing justice to reach the goal of general physical preparedness, making sure that people are tested well, that it's going to actually be effective, but it's also going to be fun and it's going to work. And that when you come in, the experience that you have isn't just random, hope we do something, hey, workouts on the board, go take care of it. It's we have these things done. We have a coach that understands what the point is, so to herd people into how we're going to scale things, what equipment uses are we going to have, what's the overall limitation, so that we can have members for 10, 15, 20 years that are continuing to experience new things, to avoid injury, to prepare themselves better, to be better, more functional humans, and also kind of still enjoy it. So that's kind of the way that, to program is an art, but it's also, it's all in service to making sure that the members get the best experience they can.
Yeah, like my goal when I do a cycle, I want it to be challenging. Like I'm going to challenge you, but I also want it to be enjoyable. And sometimes it's hard to enjoy like working that hard, but most of the time, like if you, like that's where the creativity comes in, and you can have fun workouts like that and you're sweating alongside other people, and then that makes it fun. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's for all of you that were interested in how to program. That's how the sausage is made, at least with Goldfinch Athletics with Huxley Fit Club and North Ankeny CrossFit. So thanks you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you another time. Hopefully bring Amy in on a programming discussion at another date. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.